Hi, everyone. Good afternoon to our East Coasters. Good morning to everyone else across the US. You are watching From Factory Floor to Digital Core, how manufacturers are putting AI to work. We are so glad to have you with us today because we're really taking an inside look at how manufacturers are using AI to not only boost productivity and improve quality, but really to drive operational excellence overall. So you're in for a treat today as we go behind the scenes to see how are manufacturers taking AI from an experiment and really turning that into a competitive advantage. How do you actually make all of this work in the real world? If those are questions that you and your team have been asking, you're in the right place, and we have two great experts to guide us along this journey today. I'm Jennifer Trammell. I am our Director of Vertical Strategy here at Advizex. And for more than 50 years, Advizex has worked really closely with manufacturers. We pride ourselves on being a trusted advisor who can bridge IT modernization and manufacturing outcomes. So how does our technology support our business to really make sure we're successful at the end of the day? I'd like to say thank you to HPE for being our partner in today's webinar and supporting today's event. And let me go ahead and introduce you to some of these great experts we have on our team. Chad Smyke. Chad, good afternoon to you. I wanted to let everybody know Chad is a seasoned operations leader. He really has a track record of impact at USAA and Rackspace. And since then, he's been leading data lake and big data implementations for clients across multiple industries, including manufacturing. And he helps them solve these complex data challenges. So with that foundation of data, he's been well positioned and has been at the forefront of machine learning adoption. So those early Hadoop-based systems, such as AlexNet, now the latest in transformer models, and that's really what most of our Gen AI applications are using today. So he'll be talking about some of that deep understanding of AI and ML in real world scenarios. And then personally, Chad is an avid swimmer, so maybe we'll hear a little bit more about his time in the pool there. He really enjoys building projects. He recently did an automated garden system and a tree house for his kids. Maybe we'll get a look at that. And let's also welcome Joe Clark. Joe Clark is a field chief technology officer here at Advizex. He has more than 17 years of hands-on experience architecting and implementing enterprise scale solutions. He's done this across DevOps, cloud infrastructure, virtualization, and user computing. And today he leads our team of architects who are responsible for assessing, designing, and overseeing multi-cloud and hybrid architectures. And that's really important as organizations think about accelerating and modernizing their initiatives for really large enterprises. The thing I love about Joe, he blends this deep technical experience and expertise with business alignment. He brings that same kind of approach to AI when we think about what are the business challenges we're trying to solve with this technology. So I'm excited for you to learn from Joe today. Joe doesn't really have time for hobbies with 6 kids at home. So he does like to escape, get out there hiking on a great trail. And we were just joking, a one-seater kayak is the sweet spot for Joe. We're hoping you get a little peace and quiet out in nature, Joe. So gentlemen, thank you to both of you for being here today and for sharing your expertise with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Jen.
So I was going to do a quick poll, but maybe we'll save that. Let me just level set some expectations for today. And then, Chad, I'm going to hand it over to you so we can jump into some of these manufacturing use cases. So over the next 30, 45 minutes, we really want you to be able to identify practical AI use cases in manufacturing and make sure you're delivering measurable business value. You're going to learn from real world examples of how manufacturers are using AI to improve efficiency, quality, and uptime. And we want to give you a look at some common pitfalls and success factors when it comes to moving from pilot projects into production scale AI. We've been hearing across industries about this stuck in perpetual pilot mode problem. And Joe and Chad both have insight of how do we avoid that situation and make sure we stay on track to success with AI. Plus, if you stick around to the end as a thank you, one of our lucky participants today will win a Yeti Roadie cooler. And we specifically chose this because, you know what, transforming your operation with AI, we'd say that's pretty cool. So, Chad, let me hand this over to you, and we're excited to get a look at what's happening on the factory floor in manufacturing operations when it comes to AI.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. I was just raising my hand because I would like a Yeti cooler. I just jokingly raised my hand virtually. So hopefully you guys will get to
Well,
win
it
that. I do
depends
not
how
get
well
to
you
win
do
it.
today, Chad. We'll see if it's worthy.
Just kidding. That's amazing. I heard you guys were going to be giving away something. I didn't know it was going to be that good. So that's amazing. Yeah, we'll dive right into it. Thank you for the kind introductions. The best I've ever had, I think, all year. You were talking about, some of my hobbies. Yes, I swim. I actually swim competitively, so I typically try and swim 4 or 5 days a week. When I'm traveling, if I'm lucky, it's only 2 or 3 days a week. So this week it's only 2 days because I was at a conference. That is the treehouse I built over the end of COVID. I usually get a question, will you come build me a treehouse? No, I will not. Mainly because these things were actually very expensive. I learned, if you guys recall, the wood prices like skyrocketed during COVID. I had to take a break from that. And I use reclaimed wood too, and did a lot of stuff. All that siding is reclaimed wood. The roof is reclaimed metal material, but still had to buy some wood, right? Yeah, I get that question usually afterwards. But yeah, it's a lot of fun for my kids, and I will tell you too, don't ever build a tree house and just go out there and go, oh, I'm gonna go from that tree to that tree. That's not a good way to measure because that's where all of a sudden I need a lot of wood. So definitely pre-measure,
Well,
right?
I have an 18-month at home, so he's not quite ready for a treehouse yet, but I may take some design plans from you.
Yeah, please do, please do. I've got all the pictures, all the field pictures. For the agenda today, I didn't even put one together, but it's very simple. We're going to talk specifically about use cases in manufacturing. I threw this up here just to let you know that HP has experience across multiple industry verticals. So if it does come up, I know you guys only cover manufacturing, but if you need some help there, let us know. You can see how we have these, categorized by different industry verticals. Happy to do that, right? So we're going to go specifically into use cases in the manufacturing around using different types of concepts of AI for the manufacturing vertical space. And then we're going to go right into, okay, well, how do you now adopt and use these agents for these use cases? So how do you get started? And to your point, how do you get out of that being stuck in either a constant POC phase or just getting started? Because what I'm seeing now is if they haven't gotten started, they're seeing the news of, oh, POCs aren't going anywhere. Why should I even start? Right. So we've got that happening. We kind of have just people kind of freezing out there going, they see these numbers and they think, well, why should I even run a POC? Right. 90% of them are failing. So why should we even get started? So this is very much a great kind of a how-to of using processes that everybody is used to today as humans for adopting agentic AI. So when we talk about the manufacturing AI use cases, again, I said we're diving right into it. I don't do any fluff, right? If I can, I demo, and you'll see that we're actually going to demo some of these use cases. We have some video demos I'm going to go through and run through. They typically just run better than live demos of me switching out multiple contexts. But this is one right here where we worked with a luxury car manufacturer, and it was really about just streamlining the personalization vehicle orders. So they had kind of metadata all over the place. And it was causing breakdowns of what the actual personalization on the vehicle should be. And so, as you can imagine, if I spent, if I'm a customer, I spent $80,000 on a vehicle and I did some personalizations to it, and I get it, and it's not how I said I wanted it, big problems, right? It's probably harder to fix depending on what the personalization was. And so, this is just a great example of how we took just natural language processes and went through the assembly instructions, what part of the process did the information the customer had need to be included in as a part of that. So if you come through the assembly line, if there are customizations. So for those of you who don't know, in Texas, I live in Texas, in Austin, Texas, we got a lot of trucks around here. You'll see a lot of custom trucks, right? Some of them are factory built custom. Sometimes that's the grill, right? You get custom grills from the factory. So that's a part of that process coming off the line, just giving you an example. And you got to catch right where the customization has to happen. And so we were able to streamline that process, make it faster, and then more scalable, and then more repeatable as well. In this case, this wasn't a super agentic use case. It's just using some traditional NLP processing that's been around for many years. And then, of course, they want this to morph into more customizations, all the way from how the customer goes from order buying to delivery. So what we can learn from this is sometimes the old is still good. A lot of folks, talk about agentic AI. They'll talk about using these very large language models, trillions of parameters, billions of parameter models. That may not be what you need to solve your use case. So just keep that in mind, right? We don't have to go with the very complex, the biggest thing to solve a particular use case, especially when you're getting started. Next one we have is just product classification labeling. So this is with a large meat distributor here in the US. And they just had, a hard time with identifying all these different types of meat products, because now you can imagine we got all these different types of cuts of meat for those of you who eat meat. And it's just, need to be able to identify those quickly. And then they had something that was older that was doing some visual inspection offline, but it was very slow, so had a lot of latency issues. And then they need to be able to have this model that they had go adapt to new products and then going into newer factories. So it's just was talent, right? Trying to retain talent there, trying to make them aware of this information was tough too. So if they can do more of that with technology, that's super helpful when you come through and do meat processing online. So now they were able to do is we had an automated solution to do the labeling process. When you hear training of data, even if you're fine tuning of data, that's what you have to do. You have to do some labeling of the data. We're not talking RAGs. That's a different concept. You may have heard all about retrieval augmented generation. That's very much what you have to do. You've got to sit down and take a little bit of time on that. So when it comes to data, hear about data governance. Where is your data? Yes, but in this case, we needed images of 70 different types of meats. So that's and not just one, right? You want to see multiple renditions of that. You typically want to see it in lighter conditions, darker conditions. You want to see it at different angles, and that's the kinds of things you do whenever you do labeling of data. And then we came in and did some pipeline integration, some software pipeline integration of some of their current camera system and data storage systems with the model deployment that we helped them create, and then just made it more efficient out at the edge to operate, which you'll also find in manufacturing, which I just got off a call with a large car manufacturer, is they need these things to be as efficient as possible if they're down out to the manufacturing, right? They can't go put up 5 racks of gear to run a use case, even if it is an AI use case. They can't put 64 GPUs out there, 32. Shoot, you'd be lucky to get 2 out there, right? Maybe 4 or 6. That's to be very efficient to run at the edge and then maintain that accuracy as you're not only making updates to the model and pushing it out, but as it's running in the factories.
Hey,
Another
Chad,
great use case.
Let's pause on this
Please.
use case for an example, because I think this has applications across so many of our manufacturers. You mentioned in this case, we need to understand 70 plus different cuts of meat. Can you translate this to some other manufacturers? Where might they use this kind of process?
I mean, anything that's assembly line generated, you can I always tell them to don't. So let's say your use case with manufacturing is going through in increasing quality on the assembly line. That's still too broad. I tell customers, where are you seeing, the slowest times, the worst attrition, something, right? Pick the worst KPI. Let's focus on that first to get a win. So it may be how we're packaging it. I mean, it could be the end part of the process, could be the middle, could be the beginning. And so that's how I always address it. I don't even start there. If we can go broader and bigger, yes, right? But typically that's where things fail, when you go too big, even on a use case of a whole assembly line. And it doesn't matter, guys. Object detection is very, 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 it's excellent. It works really well now. This has come so far in the last 3 years. Object detection through just an image or video is amazing now. And by the way, you don't really need your own data, Mr. Customer. There's a ton of data sets that either these models are trained on, or I can go create a demonstration without even needing your data to prove, right, that this works, but it may just be less accuracy, right? Because I don't have exactly some of your data. And so anything other than assembly line concepts and manufacturing. And if they can get cameras in there or have cameras in there, big bonus, right? If they don't have them, it's a little harder. So you're going to be starting with, now I got to go back to, okay, does your manufacturing efficiency have networking? you even have networking, right? Do you even have the cameras in there? So sometimes you got to back up. I typically find they have something somewhere of a camera, and that's where you start, right? So it gets back to, just to really answer your question, right? When you go any kind of automation assembly in a manufacturing line, this works, right? Some type of camera somewhere. That's typically what drives us to, that's the data. So that's maybe the first use case. Or again, the worst KPI, right? Let's focus on that on your assembly line.
I love that because it gives us a clear starting point, that worst KPI, and going small, focusing your attention on where should we be trying to make an improvement from a proof of concept or proof of value. So we'll talk more about that with Joe. Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, and just to like just give an example, like if this is XY, let me go, like, so I brought it up. If this is XY right here, we've literally just done workshops with customers who are like, what has the lowest risk to your business? Meaning maybe it's not something that's publicly exposed to customers, right? But has the highest value. And that's great. We come up with some use cases, but then the next question I always ask, just back to cameras, like, do you even have the data? Because sometimes we're like, oh, can we do all this stuff? And it still comes back to, do you even have this data that can support this use case? And again, back to, do you have some cameras out there? If they go, well, no. It's like, okay, well, we got to set that up first, right? Before we can even start doing these kind of model inferencing out at the edge. Great questions. And if there's any more, I think, please post them. I will try and answer them live. Happy to. I don't have to wait.
And everyone's welcome to use the Q&A feature. You should have a little Q&A bubble at the top of your screen. Pop questions in there anytime, and I'll get those over to Chad.
Yep, and this is another production line. So this is actually, if you can reference this one, Foxconn, so you think of technical manufacturing, either chipsets or manufacturing boards on a line. This is all about, they had to go and redefine their whole QA, right? Quality assurance processes for the server assembly lines in real time, and get that visual inspection accuracy to exceed even the humans. In this case, right, these guys are pretty advanced. They had some really great sophisticated cameras, not just even if it's 2K 4K cameras, but think of thermal stuff too, right? They can now do that stuff on the line. So in this case, they had the data, they had the technology there, but they wanted to get more automation on the Q&A process, and they went from a Sigma of 2.1 to 4.2. So we all know Sigma, right? But remember Six Sigma? Is that still a thing? I know that's in project management, but Sigma from 2.1 to 4.2. Sorry, I'm thinking about my kids because Sigma was a big popular word. If you guys ever heard, Riz and Sigma, and now 6.7. And then reducing that latency. This is huge, right? You're going from seconds to milliseconds. That's fast. I mean, we can't process that quickly as a human, and that's amazing to go from that kind of inference latency from seconds to milliseconds. And then, yeah, it's 96 seconds. That doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're making 100 devices a minute, 1,000 devices a minute, that adds up, right? Hence the Sigma number. And then, just not having defective products get out there too. That's huge. So you don't have to worry about any kind of warranty issues or things coming back and being processed back for refunds or warranty, depending on the product. And so we don't have access to their information, but very much, I have a demo up right now. Essentially what you're doing, so we have to kind of change up. This is the same workflow we use for them, but we're not allowed to use their data, but you can use any data. This is why I said about camera technology and just individual frames. Image technology has got really good with now it's be calling, a video or visual language models, and which is usually just diffusion-based models underneath the covers coupled with NLP models. And this is the high-level architecture. Right? I'm taking in some frames from some video or even images, possibly pre-filtering it. Typically, you want to do that because, for example, maybe you're doing a security or a safety inspection. Imagine just HSE. Yes, right? I mean, HSE is another big popular one you can get started. You're asking about, Jennifer, other use cases. There's a great one to start that's not even really, can we just try something out that's just safety oriented? Yes, you can do that. We just did a demo with some of our partners, our SaaS partners, on this just last month at a big AI4 technology conference live with some video data that's kind of pre-filtered. And what I mean by filters is you don't want to sit there and analyze video data that's just not doing anything, right? You want something where there's some actions, there's some people, there's some things coming across the line, there's something happening in the frames. And then when we get those frames and apply them to the model, we've now got the ability to detect whatever it is that we've defined that we want to detect. So in this case, when we do this demonstration, this is one of my coworkers in our professional services team. They took the same model and they just literally did it with open video feed data that's shared out there. I think it was from Kaggle. So again, there's great open data sources out there. Kaggle's one of them. And then he did something fun with his own phone too. So he literally just set it up to access his web camera, and you can literally just put up objects in front of you, right? And this model is figuring out what they are or what they're saying. So in this case, it's just a person on video. So in this case, this model has been pretty well trained to figure out if this is suspicious or not. And it did say, hey, somebody with headphones talking to the camera. So just right from those frames, it figured out, right? He's got headphones to the camera. In this case, he just flashed up for a second, a phone. Anybody see it? It said help. He does not really need help right now. And now he's updated it, said this video shows a person in an environment with headphones, and he's engaging a video call, and he's bringing up something that's unusual, and it says help written on it. Why did we show this? One of the reasons we show this is because I can now detect text on an object. Is anybody getting that? That's super, super, super powerful, right? I can now see if maybe somebody's walking around in a manufacturing facility and they're on a tablet or a phone, right? I'm not trying to get into crazy privacy, but they have our app up, right? In terms of manufacturing, are they sitting there just randomly walking around and looking at Insta? I don't know, making up a social. In terms of a safety use case, we can do that stuff now. It's crazy. And in this case, this is a good example where we had a ton of video data of people just kind of on the street walking, and then doesn't look too suspicious, right? Looks like somebody just fell over. But then we've got some other example videos of, okay, well, this looks like these people could actually be fighting. So depending on the model you're using, if you need to do any additional fine tuning or training to it, which a lot of times can be very lightweight now, you can get really good contextual information from video or images very quickly. Make sense? Any questions before I get back to a couple other use cases? Feel free to put them in the chat if you got any.
Yeah, pop them in the chat or the Q&A section there.
Yep. Okay. Just taking a break because it's a lot of talking and I need to take a break. Great. Just got two
I
more
can
use
give you a little
cases.
break with a poll question if you want.
Yeah,
You want to keep going? Here, let's pop in our poll question. So our question is about your biggest AI challenges. Let me go ahead and launch this here. I made it so you can select more than one option if you're struggling with more of these than just one. Data, skills, infrastructure, use case. You're not really sure maybe where to start, or don't even know what is our biggest challenge. What's getting in our way? I'm not sure. So data, skills, infrastructure, not sure what use case, where we would apply this. Or I don't know. Pop that in there and we'll take a look at the results here. Give you a second to reply.
Those are live. All right.
These are live, yeah.
I didn't know their polling questions were live.
All right. So let me see if I can share this with you.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing the results?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's popped up for everybody else.
Cool. So yeah, we're seeing skills are a challenge, some for data, some identifying the use case. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So this is pretty common. I typically see use cases first, then followed by skills. And typically skills even comes later. And what I mean by that is we have a use case, we go in with some vendor, right? You guys, us, someone else in the SaaS field, but it's operating it with those skills, right? Operating and scaling it is usually the next thing that comes with skills, is what I see. And then of course data. But what I'll tell folks about data, if you have data and you have it generally categorized, that's good enough now for these models. And what I mean by that is these large language models do the semantic layer of filtering, sorting, correlating comparisons very, very, very well, right? So don't get hung up on that too much. Funny story. So I've been in technology a long time. I have a home NAS. I still use a lot of folders, and my folder structure on my NAS is, right, it's beautiful. You've got generations that have come up, and I remember one time years ago, I saw a guy on his desktop and he just had stuff all over his desktop. I was like, how do you find it? He goes, I just search for it, right? And now we're going to an era where people won't even search anymore. They're just going to ask, give me this information from whatever this AI concept is in their business, in their world. And they just expect to get that information right back, right? Hopefully with supporting data information, they're checking it.
I wanted to call something out from the poll results here. Something that I saw from yesterday, I was at the Ohio X AI Summit in Columbus. And one of the things that was called out there was this exact outcome of 0% towards infrastructure, which I thought was interesting. That the hardest gap right now that people are going through is the skilling for understanding how they can actually get value out of a solution and understanding the build versus buy, and when there's building, that skilling becomes even more important, right? How close is this to the business value you're going to be returning, right? And so we had we saw a couple folks on stage that were saying, yeah, don't tell people what we're spending on inferencing because they might not like it, right? So, but it's definitely one of those things where as we're looking at infrastructure, it's kind of like you have to understand what is the value you're going to return to the business, and what are some of those key points that are, actually reducing defect or increasing safety, right? Like, and actually making meaningful difference there on the floor in most manufacturing customers. So I figured I'd just come off mute and just sort of echo that that's also something that we saw amongst a panel of experts yesterday as well. So yeah.
Good insight. Thanks,
Yeah.
Joe.
And Joe, I'll just add another point. I just came from a conference. It's the TDWI. They've been in the data governance space for many, many years because I was in the Hadoop big data space, right? Seen that conference grow and morph over the years. But I've also seen, because people have done such good data governance, especially on the relational databases, they're so kind of like, this is the way we do it. We can't change anything. So if you think of, you're hearing all about developers and coding, and they're adopting using AI for their coding experience, not seeing on the data aspect side, on that side of the data aspect. And I'll give you a perfect example. It's like, how many, I show hands, I don't know, there's about 100 people. I was like, how many are using, AI to do their SQL queries? One went up. Like, oh my God, what are you doing? They can do these SQL queries very, 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 very well. You want to talk about something pragmatic, right? It has rules, super easy. So, and then the other big thing I always see that holds up as a part of those POCs, or they don't even start, is we're still like, you can't take a copy of our data and move it over here. And that's not going to work if you want to move fast. And what I mean by that is sandboxing. You typically are doing some kind of POC in a sandbox. We need that data, right? You can put it, be on those calls if you're in a data warehouse team or part of your data governance team to make sure, hey, it's just a copy of the data. It's not the most recent. You can bring that up in every call if you need to, but you need to give them access to that data. Because if you don't, they'll find other means. And it's like, we've had shadow IT in the cloud, and now we're having shadow AI. We'll probably start having shadow data, which is scary. We don't want that.
Yeah, that absolutely opens us up to vulnerabilities.
Yep.
All right, what else you got for us, Chad?
Yeah, I got two more use cases, another video demo here. So this is just image-based quality control. So this was, again, another manufacturer. We can reference this, Seagate. This is all over. Really about the manufacturing of those processes out at the edge. And then they just had a high volume of data, right? So they had 5 terabytes per day. That's a lot of data. At least is for me. I'm like, I still think there's a lot of data coming out of the megabyte days. And they just needed to improve those defect detection rates by 90%. I'm sorry, their goal actually was, I think it was like they wanted to just get up to like, they'd be happy with 75 or 70%. We got 90%, as long with increased productivity, meaning they got better productivity on the line. And then we had a pretty good open system that we were able to come to the table with some HPE solutions, and also meet them in the middle of where they have in their software stack, and then just reducing those deployment times out at the edge was huge. So another great just image-based quality control. It's really an extension of what I was just talking about, but I'm just showing we've got them, right? We've got more. We've done more here. And then another one was an AI-powered assistant for technical support. So this one was more about streamlining the information for the user manuals from these robots. As you can imagine, they're very complex. So they needed, context-specific information. Maybe if I upload an image of a servo that's on an arm, right, give me all diagrams associated with that from the documents, and possibly right where in my documentation is there information about those servos, for example. So manual searching. This is another great use case. This wasn't manufacturing, but I worked at a power company where they had something similar, where they had so many different switches. They've got, I don't know, 10 different vendors. You're talking about 10, 7 to 10 years worth of models out there. and they just get these error codes, and they don't even know what model, they don't know how to fix the error code. So they just need to just take all these PDFs and search, I got this error code, how do I clear it? How do I fix it? Right. So it's just a great example of just having consolidated information, which again, I mentioned the semantic layer does it very well of figuring out, okay, I'm looking for this information across all of the store, and what is the answer, or possibly a couple different answers. And this is really a good example of this. It was a RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation solution.
Chad, I'm just thinking from a business standpoint, every minute a robot like that is down is costing us money, right? This
Right.
is hurting our bottom line, our productivity is decreasing. So to be able to troubleshoot quickly like that actually has very real financial results.
Yep. Absolutely it does. So this is a good demonstration. I've cut this down, right? I took all the architecture stuff out for you just to see. I like to see the live stuff instead. In this case, they had to make it. This is very much the real demo. I think this is more sample data, not all the data, right, for what we built. So their production has obviously more data. But they were able to come in and figure out, okay, well, how do I remove the battery pack from the system, right? And ask. They had turnkey questions there. Then, of course, you could go upload pictures if you needed to, or ask questions, right, to go, or not even questions, right? Maybe I'm seeing this issue. What should I look at, right? Or give me a document, what I should look at, or give me the information right away. What I will say now as we moved on beyond basic chatbots, so I bring this up while you're watching this demo, is it's great to give the information back, but now we've now moved on where everybody wants to see, where did that come from? I want to see the source, right? And so typically now we're seeing is if you do any kind of chatbot support ability, doesn't matter what it is, what we like to call them just AI assistants, is you're giving back the information, hopefully the answer, but then also here's the direct link, right? So now data becomes important in terms of how I access it, and how I get to it. So maybe not the governance in terms of where it all lives and the tiers, but what's very important now is how easy can these systems access that data after it's read it, so that they can prove, hey, this is the document it came from. So this is a good example of them using image data to send on, and then they get relevant information of what it is, the product, and then possibly some details of from the manuals. And then they go on and they say, is it calibrated? And they keep asking questions about this particular part.
So this is real time, fundamentally changing how we're troubleshooting on the factory floor.
Yes. Yeah. So you can just, I mean, that's a whole other use case, right?
Yeah.
Troubleshooting just the factory floor, right? Great example, right? Maybe there is no cameras, but you have all that data, the manuals, right? They can quickly take pictures, and maybe it's just we always have a lot of downtime in these devices. That's a whole other story. But maybe you could use AI to start documenting against that vendor, right? Hey, here's all the issues we've had. We've documented. Here's how else we're fixing it, and helping you with that, right? To go back to manufacturer. But yes, like that's another great use case, which is the maintenance. Good question, or good point. So this is where we've got a ton of other demos here. We've got other demos spanning other different verticals. I just show this because we've got some others we can show. I just picked two, right, from a manufacturing standpoint, and I thought always are kind of fun and neat, that I think are always just an inventive. People think, oh, just holding up a camera and says help. It's actually really powerful. You couldn't do that 3 years ago. I mean, it seems simple, right? But now, I mean, just like we can call people on the phones and see them, that wasn't something we had over 2 years ago. That was very reliable. These things are getting more and more reliable. These models that use both NLP and diffusion based to go serve out these use cases out of manufacturing facilities.
Nice. These are great examples. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love seeing what's real today, what's actually happening out there. And it gets all of our wheels turning about what's possible with this kind of technology. So, Joe, want to bring you in here and ask more about what you're experiencing with customers. I know that you've been involved in different types of workshops and helping our customers to really say, we know what's possible. How do we get started? Where do we start? Kind of walk us through some of that, if you would.
Yeah, for sure. I would start by saying it's more of a move from proof of concept to proof of value. Everyone understands that generative AI can create novel outputs, right? We saw from Microsoft at Ignite years ago, Alevon was doing machine learning on their factory floor to produce a digital twin and optimize throughput and do a lot of really cool things to say we can actually perform preventative maintenance and estimate, 1 million cycles, what component's going to fail first on this line. Really powerful capability, but all in reverse, right? Looking backwards at historical data and then making predictions based on the future, right? When we're talking about generative AI combined with that, the telltale use case, just like the help phone that I end up pointing to is, NVIDIA's got blueprints out there that make things very, very simple to do demonstrations of some of this tech in place. And the machine learning component is more just understanding and recognition of pattern. And generative AI taking that forward and saying, I can actually recognize that is the left-hand side, more of like, saying recognizing written word and recognizing behavior patterns is one aspect of that being fed into generative capability is what's super powerful today. And that's the new thing that we're sort of seeing. And when we're talking about proof of concept versus proof of value again, there's basically two different ways folks are addressing projects. Either they are saying, we have a plan and we have budget, and we're moving forward with that. And we believe that these new capabilities will do things like defect reduction or improve safety, increase throughput, all sorts of things that they're saying, we know that this will work and we've got budget, we've got a plan. There's other parts of the business that are like, we're not sure. We're not really positive on whether or not this is going to make a difference to the bottom line of our business, whether or not it's going to reduce safety. And so we enter a proof of value phase. And so it's whether or not projects get fully funded. So when we're having these conversations with folks, a lot of times what we end up doing is work with folks to whittle down, what do you need to make that decision? And how does that data set need to look? And how do we get a valid scoop of data and sort of take a subset of that data and say, can we prove the model and can we prove the value with a subset of that data? And then if it's worth it, it might be worth a large data cleansing process that's going to be required on the back of that. So those are the things where if there is a data cleansing process that has to happen as a part of this, so often it's warranted. It's a big part of the decision, right? So it's more like, are you convinced and you've set budget and project and direction, or do you need to work through proving it out and saying we're going to either promote or end this, conceptual exercise? So, just figured I'd sort of throw that out there for that's a lot of how we're embracing the conversation with folks is leaning into value and making sure that we're understanding the return on investment over 3, 5, 10 years, right? And whether or not and what a project budget should look like, very importantly. And then also of the 50 different use cases you've identified, which do we pick? Which are the best ones to pick? Which are the ones that are going to move the needle the most and is attacking that hard problem that we just know it's going to make a big difference with the best first move? Or is it saying, let's start small, let's get wins, let's build wins that build momentum? Right? We've seen both ways work, right? It totally depends on the appetite for risk and leveraging new technology to gain benefit.
And I just want to stress though, Joe, like you do not have to use your own data. Your data is not unique. I'm sorry. What makes it unique is how you use your data in your business and your processes though. So the point of that is don't let that be the hang up for you to not get started. I'll give you a story. It's a bit of a horror story. So we had this healthcare customer that was going to do medical imaging on MRIs and want to get this metadata out of it. And they go, we have to use our data. We can't put it somewhere. And we said, okay, fine. Let's put it in our POC environment so we can set up quickly. And then we're going to use this open source set of data. And they got like out of the box, very little fine tuning, 97% accuracy at detecting some of these features in the MRI, right, for certain types of cancer, as well as pulling out the metadata. And after that, boom, it went very fast, right? They got approvals, they went ahead and got the information. Now they were able to use their data. I just stress, like, unless you're in the telco business where you've got a lot of telemetrics that people haven't seen, all the backend networking that we use every day, and maybe in life sciences, right, you're doing genomic and chemistry, your data is really not that unique anymore. It's how you apply it to your business and your processes.
Chad, that's great. I think that might be an aha for a lot of folks today. What can I be doing with data sets that are already out there? It helps to speed up the process and you're still getting the accuracy.
There you go. Go Google search it or use AI to research it. So with that though, is
Yeah.
how do you go now get started in finding some of these agents or AI agents for your business? You could start by, finding some secret agents out there. If anybody doesn't know, this is actually a old show. I like secret agent like shows and movies. It's called Secret Agent, but it's actually called Danger Man in the UK. When they brought it over across the pond, they called it Secret Agent. It's Patrick McDouhany. I think you're saying it right. So, maybe you want it secretive, and that's where you are today. We probably don't want these guys because then, you'll forget what you just worked on in your environment. And probably you don't want agents stealing your information, right? We'll talk about that in a second. And then, I prefer a badass agent. So that's why I went working for me, my organization. So that's how I would move forward. But when you looked out in the market in the last probably year and a half, we heard this whole thing of a human versus a synthetic employee. And what did that really mean? That meant these AI agents that we now heard before. So I'm kind of culminating kind of a year and a half worth of terms that we've heard in the marketing industry. We've now kind of standardized on AI agents. And this was a big talk out there, especially if you went into the CES Expo. I think they thought like the physical robotics to like how it's going to be used in the workplace. Any workplace is going to move a lot faster. But we now see the virtual AI agent moving faster than, of course, the physical robotics. And so I think a lot of people thought, oh gosh, this is going to be me, right? I'm going to be in an office sitting there working across from this. But that's not the real reality. I like to use AI in my presentations. This is actually Sora. This is their version 1 model. They have their version 2 out. And I tried to do it in version 2, and it's actually worse, believe it or not. That was actually pretty good. I think it's resources. I think it's how many resources you actually get versus what you pay. I always like to share my prompts. That was my actual prompt I put in their engine. Those were the choices I got back, right? I used the one on the right. And then again, I said, oh, I've been using this the last 6 months. Like, I'm going to go update this for some other models. This is using WAN 2.5. It's another visual model out there. There's several. There's Kling. There's many others. And this one actually did audio. You probably won't hear it, but it's so funny. The AI robot on the right basically says, hey, based on my estimates, we need to take a break in 4.3 minutes. And human says, hey, you're learning, aren't you? I thought it was funny. I didn't tell it to do that because I took my exact same prompt I used before, and it just added audio. Like, to talk about guardrails, right? I don't want any audio. Gave me audio. And that's my prompt and the tool slip that I use. But how do we go and now apply what's happening in the AI agent space now, right? We're not going to be working with side by side with robots anytime soon, I think. And how do we now go identify those and start using them? I like to reuse processes and tools all the time. I'll reuse a tool, even in the technology space, that isn't meant for what it's meant to be, and use it in some other way. Same thing with the process. We have it today. How do we hire people? When we hire humans, we go through and we do a resume review. We review their career history and achievements and what they've done, right? And in the career, for the AI side, we typically review the model capabilities, the different models that are out there, and what that model is able to do. So think of a large language model that's NLP based. It's very good with text, for example. There'll be VLMs that are good with visual information. And then what do we do typically next? Unfortunately, we have to, because we got some people that lie out there. We got to do background checks, check their education. Do they actually work here? Check some information. In this case, you want to go look at their training data. You don't have to necessarily audit it, but if you're using an open source model, they post what training data they use there. This gets lost to a lot of folks. When you go to Hugging Face and look at a model, they show all the training data, right, that they use to train that model. And so that's a good important point, because you're basically now looking basically at its background and its education, right, in terms of how it was trained. And then when it comes to our interviewing process, right, we're going to go look at soft skills. How would they be in leadership, working with other teams? In this case, this is where we start to get a little bit of more, maybe we're now setting up proof of value or proof of concept to test that task performance, right? And again, I always say start off smaller, like you heard me saying some of the manufacturing use cases on the line, to test that task performance. Then we get into salary negotiation. So we do negotiate compensation, healthcare benefits, right? 401k, I don't know, depending on the size of your organization, base pay, maybe there's variable compensation there. This is a big one. It's not just the subscriptions, usage costs. We all understand that in IT space. Terms. If you are using a large foundational language model, make sure you're including legal to read the terms, because what these folks are doing, if you don't like it, even some of the smaller people, if you don't go check those terms, they're going to reuse your data, reuse all their prompts to train in their next run. So what's happening is you're slowly giving them part of your business process knowledge from your company, into the next model run. So that's super, super important. One way you can avoid that completely is to use open source models and run them on-prem so you don't have to worry about other people's terms. Onboarding, training, typically orientation, integrating teams, maybe you have a mentorship program. This is where now we may do some more fine tuning and start looking at integration it into our workflows and processes on a back end. And then, right, we do a performance review, annual reviews, maybe every quarterly reviews, coming up with development plans. And this is where we're monitoring for accuracy and performance. How well is the model performing? Meaning how quick is it to respond, and how accurate is it to respond to that information, right? Are we getting proper information back for the use case? So I'll leave that up for just a second because typically everyone takes screenshots of this. So go for it, even though I think we're going to share this afterwards. And really, I've got, I just want to be mindful of time because we're approaching it. Jennifer, I've just got a few more pieces of content here.
Go
just
for
want to
it.
make sure we have, okay. So when you look at now, if I've identified an agent, there's two different types that you can support today. The agents are what we're all using with ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini. They have their own process and tools and use it in memory features behind the covers you don't see. What's predominantly out there in the market right now is workflows, and they're still very good, right? Don't get lost in that. But this is the difference. An agent is I take some data in. There is some large language model now orchestrating everything. Even with ChatGPT, if you use it today, now, if you remember, you used to have to click the little research button to go into research mode. You don't do that anymore, right? It's looking for context. Like I'm looking for the latest, right? It's going to go, okay, I can't go look at my knowledge training. I go look at the latest. I got to research, right? So it's looking for context information in that prompt to go do some kind of query result. I'm just using one as a research example, but if you were going to do something more math oriented, right, it's going to go to something behind the scenes and go do some specialized queries, possibly other different models, and then tools for returning you some, maybe more complicated math. When we get into agentic workflows, there's several more popular ones out there like prompt chaining, parallelization, routing, the self-feed evaluator, and then really orchestrating workers. So you're managing and orchestrating multiple workers before you get a result. I talk through, I have more detail on this on like I do live demos of this, of like, okay, here's a prompt chaining example and where that would be used. So for example, routing, right? Think of support cases, managing a support ticket. You get a request for support, there's some issue, and go look through multiple different knowledge sources until you get a response to honor a good support response. When you look at how to adopt these, so when you look at large agents, they're really good for adaptive decision making. They just have the most flexibility. However, with that flexibility becomes increased risk. So you got to really review those outputs. They handle maybe something that's more complex or has uncertainty to it. So imagine there's different data sources, different data types coming in all the time. That's a good example. They have really good for iterative improvement. So when it needs to go do some multi-step reasoning or refining those responses over multiple attempts, which you don't see as a human, which you don't see behind the scenes when you use Claude or someone else, it's doing a bunch of multiple attempt reasoning that you don't see before it gives you an answer, right? A good example. And then doing task execution autonomously, and then just balancing where there's like kind of deep problem solving and needing speed, versus the cost. So just a quick overview of agents, and when we get into workflows, really good at structured, repeatable processes. Don't discount that. You guys remember the RPA days? We've been talking about RPA for probably the last 5 or 7 years. This is more of like, if you want to think about RPA, but way more logic. It's not if then, right, things. It's you can use different language models to really understand what's happening. Think of like error monitoring, log monitorings. Oh my God, it's amazing at that. I use it all the time. I do not look at my logs anywhere. You're talking about from an operational guy that will go through one log message at a time. I literally point these things at 3 different log messages, right, everywhere, and I get an answer within 10 seconds and a resolution, right? It's huge. When efficiency and scalability is important, that's really where we are right now, right? People don't want to spend too much money to get started. And then having that predictability and control over costs, as well as what's happening in that workflow, and then having that task specialization. So I have one customer, they just use a small little model, and they have this application where they do live language translation, English to Spanish, Spanish to English, right? Just, it seems simple, so easy for them to do. They can even support Spanglish, a little mixed English and right Spanish if you're typing. Uh, and that just was a big help, right? Cut down on communication issues, but as well as just working with employees and doing what they needed to get done in the organization. And the last one is just error mitigation and oversight. And if you don't know where to start, you know, between Advizex and HPE, we've got a portfolio of AI solutions here, everywhere from like a little dev kit, a couple servers and some software to get started, to of course what we call our sovereign AI factories, which supports large 1,000, 2,000 node clusters with 2,000, 4,000 GPUs. So we have the experience of managing this from getting started to growing at larger scales, and that's what we're here for, to help you accomplish within your organization.
Absolutely. Chad, thank you so much for walking us through this and really understanding what's real, what's happening today. Hey, Joe, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier. We touched on ROI for a second, and we were having a roundtable discussion in upstate New York last week, and this topic of hard ROI and soft ROI came up.
Yeah.
Wanted to hear from your perspective, what are you hearing from customers? What's a soft ROI that may justify some of these investments? And what are the expectations on hard ROI?
Yeah, I mean, customer delight, quality of life improvements are some that we end up hearing a lot. And some of that may be by way of example for in the medical world now, a lot of folks are using dictation services in rooms with patients. And they're doing that specifically to say, I can be face to face with my patient instead of turning away in a laptop. What's the value of that in a consultation? It's pretty high, right? To say that that's a high value, that I can actually be more human in an interaction because I have something else taking notes for me, right? Now, can you put a dollar amount on that? Did that reduce that physician's rate? Not really, but it improved the experience overall for the consumer, right? So quality of life improvements is one of those soft things. And then also when you think of code generation use cases, many folks are using that, and it's saying, you can't take it away from me, but I can't promise you I'm going to be able to churn out more features, per month. Now, there's a good chance that they can, right? But it's more about saying, hey, can I use agents in a meaningful fashion to take care of the things that I wanted to take care of in code development, such as, creating tests, creating documentation, right? Running tests, all the things that maybe aren't the focal point of what they do and drive value downstream in, but they have to do. And those are the things where it's like, well, you can't take it away from me, but it's going to be really hard for me to explain how valuable it is to me. So that's sort of the squishy value, right? Of saying those are the things that end up coming in, and they end up being on the EQ side rather than the IQ side of the equation, right? For left brain, right brain. And the hard and fast ones are pretty cut and dry, right? It ends up being shipped product, additional sales, like things that are quantitatively measurable rather than qualitatively measurable through things that are more subjective and based on a human's opinion. So I think it's interesting now that some of the best LLM ranking charts are all based on actual human input, right? They're not based on, they're not based on the things that other chatbots are doing or re-ranking or, some of the SWE bench tests. It's like, okay, some of the best tests are actually just actual humans using the models and saying, I like that response better than that one, right? So it's, I think it's really interesting. But with ROI, it does come up all the time. And, just like was said before, I feel like so many people get hung up on the fact that I need to build a picture perfect data warehouse before I do anything. It's like,
don't do that. I just got done talking to people about that. Don't.
Exactly. Don't do it. It's not worth it. You might not even need your data. You might be able to use 100% public data. Many customers of ours are using 100% public data for a lot of their use cases, and they don't need to get through any of this complete data sanitization stuff. So the idea of start with data was something that was, I don't know, it's about a year and a half to 2 years out now, right? From being a thing that was sort of front and center. And from my standpoint, it's start with the right use case, start with the correct adoption methods, start with the best place that you can drive value across your organization, and then work backwards into the requirements that are going to drive that forward.
Thanks, Joe. We are coming up on the top of the hour here. I just wanted to share one piece of data that I was looking at earlier. Here, let me share my screen. So this is from HG Insights. It is their AI readiness report, looking at top industries. And manufacturing scores well above average. The average score was 24.5 out of 100 as far as maturity and readiness for AI. So awesome to see manufacturing, at leading the pack there. And I bring this up because that's 26.7 out of 100. And I think this really indicates how far many enterprises have to go to be in a position to capitalize on new and emerging AI technologies. So in the whole scheme of things, we're still in really early days here. And this is exciting. So if you feel like you're behind, you're not. We are still in early days, and finding those right use cases, those areas that are going to add value to your business. That's the most important thing as you get started. Chad, before I announce the winner of our Yeti Roadie Cooler, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, just one final thought that I've been seeing across this whole, we're not successful, our POCs. The business side of that has been, I didn't include a wider audience for my use case. So what I mean by that is the data scientist came up with it, or just the business person, right? So make sure you form some type of committee. I just kind of call them, some kind of AI SME committee, where it's somebody from IT, there's an executive sponsor, there's someone from the business side that matters, and the person that would be working with that data. Give you an example in healthcare. Great healthcare example. They were doing the dictation, and what they didn't foresee though is they like set up a whole other tool and process outside of what the nurses were using and said, I'm not using that. I don't got time for that, right? They didn't go investigate and involve them and understand, how do you work today, right? Where do we insert these things in your workflow so they're as minimally disruptive as possible? So just try and form up those committees, because that's where I've seen the most success, right? They're forming these up and they're getting that feedback from everyone that it could impact, and everyone will have the understanding of what you're working on, not just some cool science experiment.
Well, and wouldn't you rather know that on the front end than
Yes.
having the time, money, energy invested on something the team's not going to use? So important to get those stakeholders engaged up front. Awesome. Chad, thanks for sharing your expertise with us today. Joe, thank you for weighing in on what we're seeing with customers here. And now the moment you've been waiting for. The winner of our Yeti Roadie Cooler, because it is pretty cool to be transforming your operations with AI, goes to Justin Riley. So Justin, we will follow up with you and get that cooler over to you. All right, got a hands up.
All right, way to go, Justin.
Congratulations, Justin. For everyone, though, we'd like to provide our AI checklist for manufacturing. So we will send that in a follow-up to you. And as we can help along this journey, along this AI journey, please reach out, whether that's from identifying use cases, making sure your infrastructure is in place, looking at data, what do we need? Advizex, HPE, we are here to be your partners along this AI journey. And it's our pleasure to walk that road alongside of you. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Jennifer Trammell with the Advizex team, and we so appreciate the time that you've spent with us. And good luck as you continue to transform your own organizations along your digital journey. Thank you.